Stop renting that steam cleaner. I mean it. Put it back on the shelf. I've walked into probably 400 houses over the years where someone rented a $60 upholstery machine, ran it over their sofa for an hour, and made the couch worse than when they started. Wet foam padding underneath, a ring of dirt pushed to the edges instead of lifted out, a smell that wasn't there before because the cushions never fully dried. I've had to tell people their sofa was done, not because it was too dirty to save, but because somebody tried to save it the wrong way. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a sofa. It's not one surface. It's fabric sitting on foam, sitting on springs, and every layer holds moisture differently. When you soak the top layer with a machine, you're not cleaning the couch. You're feeding water into a sponge that can't dry itself out. That's how you get mildew smell on a cushion that looked spotless 3 days ago. My grandfather ran a janitorial crew out of a 2-man van back when upholstery cleaning meant a horsehair brush and elbow grease. No machines, no steamers. And the technique he used, the one I still use on client sofas today, costs about $2 in ingredients and takes less time than waiting for a rental machine to charge up. It's a method I picked up watching Japanese housekeeping techniques years ago, and it clicked immediately because it's built on the same principle my grandfather taught me. You don't flood a problem, you draw it out. That's the whole philosophy. Dirt, oil, and skin cells sitting deep in fabric fibers don't need to be blasted with water and suction. They need to be lifted gently with the right dry and near dry materials working together. I've custed this on couches that hadn't been cleaned in 8-9 years, fabric that looked permanently gray, and it came back. Not looks a little better, but visibly, noticeably different in under 30 minutes, with stuff you probably already have in your kitchen. No machine, no scrubbing, no soaking the cushions and hoping for the best. Let me show you what's actually going on inside that couch first, because once you understand why it gets dirty the way it does, the fix makes a lot more sense. Problem. Here's what nobody notices until it's too late. Your sofa doesn't get dirty in one spot. It gets dirty in a pattern, and that pattern tells you exactly what's happening. Look at the armrests first. Darker than the rest of the fabric, right? Slightly shiny in the light if it's a synthetic blend. That's not wear, that's months, sometimes years of hand oil, lotion, and whatever was on your fingers when you sat down. Phone grease, food residue, sunscreen in the summer, pressing into the fibers every single time you rest your arm there. Then there's the seat cushions, especially the middle one if you've got a 3-seater and everyone fights over the same spot. That cushion takes body oil, sweat, and dead skin every day. And unlike a mattress, you're not flipping it or washing the cover every week. It just accumulates. The backrest is the sneaky one. People assume it stays clean because nobody's actively rubbing it. But that's where dust settles, where pet hair gets trapped against the fabric weave. And if you've got a fireplace or you cook a lot, where airborne grease and soot land in a fine film you can't even see until you run a white cloth over it and the cloth comes back gray. I've pulled seat cushions off client sofas and shown them the underside, the part that's been sitting flush against the frame, never touched by sunlight or air. It's a different color, sometimes a completely different color. That's the fabric's original tone. Everything else has been slowly shifting for years, and because it happens gradually, your eyes adjust. You stop seeing it. This is the same reason people don't notice their teeth yellowing day to day, but panic in a before photo from 2 years back. The reason most people don't catch this until it's bad is simple. Sofas don't announce themselves like a dirty floor does. A floor, you see footprints immediately. A sofa fades so slowly, but by the time it's obvious, you're not dealing with surface dust anymore. You're dealing with oil that's bonded to the fiber, dust that's packed into the wave, and in a lot of cases, a faint smell that's crept in for months of moisture sitting in fabric that never fully airs out. By the time someone calls me about a sofa, it's usually not, "This looks a little dull." It's, "We're thinking about replacing it." That's the gap between noticing early and noticing late, and it's a big one. Why it happens. The reason fabric holds onto dirt the way it does comes down to how the fibers are actually built, and this is something you can test yourself with a magnifying glass if you want proof. Woven upholstery fabric, cotton blends, polycotton, most microfiber, isn't smooth. Under magnification, it looks like a tangle of tiny threads with gaps and loops running through it. Those gaps are exactly where oil and dust want to go, because oil is sticky by nature, and dust is light enough to get pulled in by that stickiness like a magnet. Once oil sits in those gaps for a while, it partially hardens. Not solid, but tacky enough that dry dust and skin particles just keep sticking to it, layer after layer. That's how old dirt is harder to remove than fresh dirt. It's not more dirt, it's dirt that's had time to bond. This is the exact same thing that happens on a stovetop hood filter, just slower. Grease sits, dust sticks to the grease, more grease lands on top, and eventually you're not cleaning dust, you're cleaning a laminated mess of both. Here's the part that surprised me the first time my grandfather explained it, and it's the part almost nobody gets right when they try to clean a couch themselves. Water alone doesn't break that bond. Oil and water don't mix, you learned that in grade school, and it's true here too. So when someone sprays plain water or even just runs a wet cloth over the fabric, they're moving surface dust around, but the oil-bonded layer underneath barely notices. It's actually why some cleaned sofas look damp and streaky right after. You've disturbed the top layer without touching what's actually holding the dirt in place. You need something that breaks the oil's grip first, and something that can carry the loosened dirt out of the weave without shoving more moisture down into the padding. That's the whole science behind the method I'm about to walk you through. It's not complicated chemistry, it's just using the right agent to break the bond and the right technique to lift the mess out instead of pushing it deeper. Common mistakes. I want to go through the 3 things people try before they call someone like me, because I've seen every one of these backfire, and understanding why they fail will make the actual method make a lot more sense. Mistake 1. Dish soap and water straight on the fabric. This is the most common thing I run into. Someone mixes dish soap with warm water in a bowl, dips a rag, and starts scrubbing in circles. Dish soap does cut grease, that part's true. It's why it works on dishes. But on fabric, without controlling how much water goes in, you end up oversaturating the material. The soap breaks the oil down, sure, but then that soapy, oily mixture has nowhere to go except deeper into the cushion. It soaks into the foam, and soap residue left in fabric actually attracts dirt faster afterward because soap filler is slightly sticky when it dries. So people end up with a couch that gets dirty again in half the time it used to. I've seen sofas that were cleaned 3 months ago look worse than sofas that were never touched, purely because of leftover soap residue acting like flypaper for dust. Mistake 2. Scrubbing hard with a stiff brush. I get it. Instinct says harder pressure equals cleaner result. It's the opposite with woven fabric. Aggressive scrubbing, especially with a stiff bristle brush, physically abrades the fibers. You're not lifting the dirt out, you're grinding it further into the weave while also fraying the surface threads. That fraying is what creates those fuzzy, worn-looking patches you see on older couches. Patches that were caused by cleaning attempts, not by actual use. And on certain fabrics, particularly anything with a printed or dyed pattern, hard scrubbing pulls dye out unevenly, leaving lighter blotches that are honestly harder to fix than the original dirt was. I've had to tell clients their scrub marks were permanent. That's a rough conversation. Mistake 3. Renting a steam or wet extraction machine without understanding drying time. This is the big one, the one I opened with. These machines aren't bad tools in the right hands. Professionals use commercial versions of them constantly. The problem is home rental units push a lot of water into the fabric and don't extract nearly as much back out as a commercial grade machine does. So you end up with cushions that are damp 3, 4, 5 inches deep into the foam. In a house without strong airflow or sunlight hitting that spot, that moisture can sit for 2 or 3 days. That's more than enough time for mildew to start, especially in humid climates. And once mildew sets into foam padding, there's no cleaning trick that fixes it. you're looking at cushion replacement. I always tell people if you're not using a commercial-grade extractor with real suction power, you're better off not using water-heavy machines on upholstery at all. All three of these mistakes come from the same misunderstanding. People think cleaning a sofa is about applying more soap, more pressure, more water. It's actually about controlled removal. Loosen the bond, lift it out, keep moisture minimal. That's the entire principle behind what I'm about to walk you through next. Solution. All right, here's the method. I'm going to walk you through it in stages, the same way I'd do it on a client sofa, and I'll tell you exactly why each step exists so you're not just following instructions blindly. Stage 1. The dry pass. Before any liquid touches the fabric, you need to remove everything that's just sitting loose on the surface. Dust, hair, crumbs, whatever's collected in the seams. Skip this step and you're basically rubbing sandpaper into your fabric once you add moisture, because loose grit turns into an abrasive the second it gets wet. Use a soft bristle brush. A dry, clean paintbrush works fine if you don't have an upholstery brush, and go over the entire sofa in short strokes, following the direction the fabric naturally lays. Pay a special attention to seams, the base of the cushions, and anywhere two pieces of fabric meet, because that's where debris hides. If you've got a handheld vacuum with a brush attachment, run it over the surface afterward on low suction, no water, just to pull up with the brush loosened. This step alone takes maybe 5 minutes, and it matters more than people think. I've seen people skip straight to the trick and wonder why it didn't work as well for them. It's because they were working moisture into a layer of loose dust instead of clean fabric. Stage 2. Build your solution. This is where the $2 part comes in, and it's genuinely this simple. In a spray bottle, combine 1 tablespoon of vinegar, 1 teaspoon of dish soap, a clear dye-free one if you can, so you're not introducing extra color onto the fabric, 2 cups of warm water. That's it. The vinegar is doing the real work here. It's mildly acidic, and that acidity is what breaks down the oil bond I mentioned earlier, the same reason vinegar cuts through hard water stains and grease on kitchen surfaces. The dish soap adds a small amount of surfactant, which helps lift the loosened oil away from the fiber instead of letting it resettle. And keeping the water ratio high rather than making a thick, soapy mix is what keeps this from oversaturating the fabric the way mistake number 1 does. Shake the bottle gently before each use so the soap doesn't separate and pool at the bottom. Here's the rehook point, because this next part is the one step almost everyone skips, and it's the one that actually makes the difference between looks okay and looks new. Stage 3. The mist and blot technique. Not spray and scrub. Test an inconspicuous spot first, like the back of a cushion or underneath where the sofa meets the wall. Spray a light amount and wait 5 minutes to make sure there's no discoloration or texture change. Most fabric blends handle this fine, but leather, suede blends, and silk need a completely different approach. So if you're not sure what your fabric is, check the tag or don't risk it. Once you've confirmed it's safe, mist, don't soak, a section about 2 feet by 2 feet. You want the fabric barely damp, almost like morning dew, not wet enough that you can see droplets sitting on the surface. This is the exact opposite of what a steam machine does, and it's the whole reason this method doesn't create the mildew risk. Now, take a clean microfiber cloth, fold it into quarters so you've got a fresh surface to work with, and blot, don't scrub. Press down, hold for a second, lift. Move to a fresh section of the cloth every few blots, because once a section of cloth is loaded with lifted dirt, continuing to use it just drags that dirt back across the fabric instead of removing it. This is the part people rush. Slow, repeated blotting with a clean surface each time is what's actually pulling the oil-dirt bond out of the weave. Scrubbing just spreads it around, which is exactly the mistake we talked about earlier. Work your way across the sofa in these small sections rather than spraying the whole thing at once. It keeps you from letting any one area sit wet for too long, and it lets you actually see your progress cushion by cushion. Stage 4. The dry lift finish. Here's a trick most people have never heard of, and it's the one that separates a decent clean from a genuinely deep one. Once a section has been misted and blotted and looks mostly dry to the touch, take a clean, slightly damp, not wet, just barely, microfiber cloth and run it in one direction firmly across the fabric grain, almost like you're petting the couch in one consistent motion. This does two things. It realigns the fabric fibers so they're all lying the same direction, which is what gives cleaned upholstery that slightly richer, more even look you notice on professionally cleaned furniture. And it catches any last bit of loosened debris the blotting cloth missed, because the friction and the slight dampness create just enough pull to lift fine particles the blotting cloth couldn't grab. Pro tip, and this one I don't see anywhere online, keep a second, completely dry towel in your other hand and follow immediately behind the damp cloth on each stroke. That second towel absorbs the tiny bit of remaining moisture before it has a chance to sit in the fibers, which cuts your drying time by more than half. On a normal, humid day, sofas cleaned this way are touch dry within 20 to 30 minutes instead of the hours it takes with a wet-only approach. I picked this up from watching how my grandfather dried out flooded basement carpets faster with the two-towel method, and it turns out the same principle works beautifully on upholstery. Stage 5. Stubborn spots. For any specific stain that doesn't lift with the general pass, a coffee ring, an old grease mark, mix a small amount of baking soda with just enough of your vinegar solution to form a thick paste, roughly the consistency of toothpaste. Apply it directly to the stain. Let it sit for 10 minutes. You'll actually see it start to dry slightly lighter in color as it pulls moisture and oil up out of the fiber. Then take a dry cloth and gently wipe the paste away, working from the outside of the stain toward the center so you're not spreading it outward. Follow with one light blot using your vinegar spray solution to remove any powder residue. Stage 6. Drying and airing out. Once you've worked through the whole sofa, open a window if you can, or point a fan at it for about 20 minutes. This isn't strictly necessary with how little moisture this method uses, but it speeds things up, and it also airs out any leftover vinegar smell, which fades completely within a couple hours anyway. It's not like the chemical smell you get with a lot of store-bought upholstery cleaners. That's the entire method. No machine plugged in, no rental fee, no cushions sitting wet for 2 days wondering if you just created a mold problem. Just a controlled breakdown of the oil bond and a careful lift out of what was hiding in there. That's the trick. Start to finish, and it costs less than a coffee to put together. If you try it, I want to know how it went. Drop a comment with what your sofa looked like before and after, or tell me what your worst cleaning problem in the house right now is. I read them all, and honestly, half the videos on this channel come from questions people leave in the comments. If your sofa turned out better than you expected, there's a good chance your mattress has the same buildup happening. Same oil, same dust, just a different piece of furniture nobody thinks to check. I've got a video on this channel walking through a similar dry first method for mattresses that follows the same logic we just covered here. If this was useful, consider subscribing. I put out a new video every week, mostly stuff I've picked up over 20 years of doing this for a living, or things my grandfather and father taught me before that. No gimmicks, just what actually works when you're the one who has to clean up the mess for real. See you in the next one.